No, so .NET MAUI Blazor, that's what we're going to talk about. I just said to this lovely gentleman here in the front, like, I always find this kind of like awkward, and I have kind of like a love-hate relationship with these kinds of slides. Like, you know, I'm not gonna tell you my whole resume or who I am, or, but I always like to give a little bit of context, and don't take a picture of this while I'm introducing myself here, like I do like to talk about myself, oh my gosh. But I also do like to give a little bit of context about who I am. So my name is Gerald. I drove here for 3 hours, so I hope we'll get a big round of applause at the end. Because I live all the way down in like Maastricht, for the people who know it. Well, already applause, yes. So yeah, but I do this a lot, giving these sessions and whatnot. So I really enjoy being here again for live audience, so that's really cool. I work at Microsoft, I work at the actual .NET MAUI team, so I have been creating some of the stuff that John has been talking about, and I will be talking about. If you can't get enough of me, then I also do some stuff on YouTube, so if this is something that you're interested in, then like all the YouTube influencers say, like, subscribe, do all the things, and yeah. I also am on Twitter. If you have something that you cannot share publicly, then feel free to email me with some kind of questions. I try to answer all of them. I don't always succeed. But preferably, if you have something that you can share publicly, like how are things with the app size or whatnot, tweet at me or find something else publicly, because then other people can join in, and they are much smarter than me and they have all the answers. So on the agenda today is a little bit of what you've seen before with John. But it basically comes down to this. It's going to be, what is .NET MAUI Blazor, right? So first we have to talk a little bit about what is .NET MAUI. We've all seen that, but I'm going to tell it a little bit worse than John did probably, but I'm going to try anyway. Then what is Blazor, right? I hope all people know what Blazor is. Do we already know? Yay, this is going to be a short presentation then. Good. And then we have what is .NET MAUI Blazor together. So everyone knows Blazor. That's cool. So what is .NET MAUI? I'm just going to go over this real quick so that, you know, this session kind of like still follows and whatever it's supposed to do. It's the evolution of Xamarin Forms, right? We already heard that. And for Xamarin Forms, we had this cross-platform app based on C# .NET for iOS, Android, UWP. And then on the little line down here, I don't know if the people at home can read it as well. Well, they can probably read it better than here in the, anyway. We have also Tizen, Linux, WPF, macOS. Those were kind of like, meh, we support them, but not really, because they were donated by the community, because it's all open source, right? So we had those as well, but our primary target that we supported from within Microsoft was iOS, Android, UWP. But, and I don't know if this is true or not, I like to believe it is, Xamarin Forms, it already sounds kind of boring, right? Forms, someone asked like, how can I customize and make all these cool UIs? You totally can. I have links for that to prove it. I don't have them right here, but I can find them. No, you can do anything that you can do on the native platforms also with Xamarin Forms and now .NET MAUI, but it's called Xamarin Forms, and that already sounds kind of boring, and that kind of image kind of stuck with us, I feel, and that's because it was designed to do that way. Or there was kind of like a setup not too long ago where the first session was by someone else, also kind of like the same thing where he talked about .NET MAUI, and I talked about .NET MAUI Blazor, and then he dared to say that Xamarin Forms was only for prototyping. He was a friend. He hasn't been seen in 2 months. But anyway, so I don't know if it's for prototyping, but if you look at like Xamarin, if you know a little bit about the history, Xamarin was a company that was acquired by Microsoft, so it was a separate company. And this is an image I pulled somewhere from the archives from when it was not even Microsoft, I think, and you don't have to read all the things here, but it's like, what Xamarin approach is best for you? And then you can see Xamarin Forms is best for, and then you can see all these boring things, right? It already had dark mode, apparently. But you have a gray box, another gray box, and then, woo, a blue box. But if you want to do more, if you want to do media players and games and maps, then you have to do it with Xamarin iOS and Xamarin Android, apparently. So that image kind of stuck with us, and that's also how Xamarin Forms was kind of architected probably, right? For the data entry applications, simple applications, maybe prototyping, who knows? But kind of like for those things. But people were expecting more. People wanted to do more, and people could do more. We provided them with all the flexibility to actually, create the coolest things. But the core architecture never really changed. We tried to stay backwards compatible, and we succeeded forever, basically. So if you go back to version 1 and you update it to 5, it still works. Probably not, but you can make it work. So we have been backwards compatible for a while, and that also meant that we couldn't make really big changes for like the architecture. And so people were doing a lot, but the performance was really starting to suffer from that, right? So we needed to do something. Luckily, we also want to, be closer to the .NET ecosystem. So what we're doing now is rewriting the whole thing, new architecture, and we're calling it .NET MAUI, which stands for, did you actually tell that, John? Did I? Yeah, oh, phew, okay. .NET Multi-Platform App UI. And we made the P kind of like conveniently lowercase because .NET MAUI is kind of strange, right? So .NET MAUI it is. And this is now our cross-platform apps development system UI based on C# and .NET for iOS, Android, Windows, and macOS. So you can see a little bit different from before. We now have iOS, Android, that's still the same. We now call it Windows because UWP died somewhere in between here. And we were not going to tie ourselves to another technology again. So we just say Windows, then we're safe, right? Because now it's technically WinUI. And macOS. So we can also have macOS as a first-class citizen now. So then we have .NET MAUI is the most productive way to develop native apps that perform great on any device that run Android, iOS, macOS, or Windows from a single code base. Well, that's the story that John already told as well with like the whole single project system and whatnot. I'll touch upon that very briefly. So again, a little architecture, we can go over this really quickly. It starts with like all the app SDKs, right? From Android, iOS, macOS, and Windows, which is easy because that is us. And then you have the app code, right? That's the stuff where you want to really write your code. That's your business logic. That is the app that's going to make you rich. You're $1 billion app. So that's where you want to spend all your time, right? But you have all these SDKs, you have to write in 4 or 3 languages. That's something that you don't want to do. So how do we get from like all the SDKs to your app code? First, we have the .NET runtime. So the .NET runtime we now have running on all the platforms that I've mentioned before and many more, Linux, you name it, we can run it on there. On top of that, we have the base class library. So that's basically, you run everything through that. All the APIs are in there, and that then, because the .NET runtime technically, besides Windows, still runs on Mono, which is the open source implementation of the whole .NET framework, .NET runtime. Doesn't really matter. The .NET base class library is now unified across all the platforms for .NET 6, so that's the only thing that you need to know. And then on top of that, we have .NET for Android, .NET for iOS, and WinUI. So this is kind of like what was before known as Xamarin iOS, Xamarin Android. We only renamed it because you were already using the platform namespaces and stuff, right? So nothing really needs to be changed code-wise for that. If you're using it on this layer, just the marketing name kind of changed. So you don't need to do anything for that. And on top of that, we now build .NET MAUI, right? So we have that. This abstracts basically away all of the things below there so that you can just focus on your app code. You know how to work with .NET MAUI, and now you can build your apps and run them on all the platforms here. Phew. All right. So John already went over this extensively. We have a lot of controls. You can do all kinds of navigation. We have a renewed focus on like right to left stuff, which is really important in some areas of the world, of course. And accessibility is something that we now have. Like, when we started designing this stuff, we now have it built in instead of kind of like retrofitting it and not really working properly. So that's something that we have a big focus on. So new project system, everything is single project now. If you have been working with Xamarin Forms, this is your typical setup. A couple of projects here, the iOS, Android, and then your shared project. Now we smash that all together and we just have that single project with the different folders for the platform-specific code. You can share your images, your fonts, your platform code. It's all just there. You can very easily create a splash screen now. We have all kinds of tricks for that to make that way easier. And also the question just here, like, if you want to have all these images in a gazillion resolutions for all the different platforms, don't need to worry about that anymore. Just drop in an SVG and we will generate all the different resolutions for you. The run menu, we've already seen that. This slide should have been gone. And beyond, so this, I actually kept this in for the question about the customization. One route that we're also exploring is more like the way that maybe Flutter does it or some other frameworks where we kind of draw everything, because kind of like the paradigm of .NET MAUI and Xamarin Forms has been you define a button or a label or a whatnot or a slider, and we're going to translate that to however it should look and feel on that platform, right? We're going to use the actual native look and feel. Obviously, a lot of people have been asking for, like, I want to have that pixel perfect same UI across all the platforms. So we're looking into this. It's experimental right now. Maybe it will be additional to all that we're doing. Maybe at some point we'll replace it. Who knows? We're looking into it, but this allows you to kind of like, really draw everything that you want to and really make that customization much, much easier. So that's one route that you could use as well. Essentials, we've talked about that. So the story behind this, why this was broken up is like, if you know all about the history of Xamarin Forms, the Essentials name kind of makes sense. But now, because now that's so interesting, maybe you're not interested in this, but I'm here and you're not, so I'm just going to tell it. What's happening right now is that we see a lot of people not seeing this as a cross-platform kind of like UI framework. Which is, kind of like a nice hobby project from Microsoft. But now we see this is inside of the .NET ecosystem. This is a first-class citizen. And now suddenly a lot of people are starting to look at this for the first time, right? This is suddenly the new UI framework by Microsoft that is accidentally also cross-platform. So that's really cool. So a lot of people will not know about this history, which is perfectly fine. But then the discoverability of this might not be great, right? That you have to go to MAUI Essentials. Why is it Essentials? So what we did is break it up into MAUI devices.sensors and whatnot. So a couple of sensors are in there, and we've broken it up into more logical places so people could discover it easier, but all the APIs are still very much the same. I'm going to skip the demo for this one because John showed you that really extensively, so that's going to be good. Maybe real quick then, I don't know if you went over this, but just to get my story straight here as well. So you still have to use this. I was just telling this to someone here just before the session started. So we're kind of like in a weirdish situation right now where .NET MAUI has gone GA, which is general availability. So that's like kind of like, stable. We say that you can start using this in production, which is fine. But the tooling to actually use .NET MAUI is still in preview. And we don't want to have preview bits in stable products. So all the tooling is in Visual Studio Preview. But .NET MAUI is stable, but you can only use it with the tooling. So in order to use it, you still need Visual Studio 2022 Preview today. Hopefully that changes soon, because this is always very confusing. But whenever you've installed Visual Studio 2022 Preview, then you can create a new project. You should tick the .NET MAUI workload in here, and then you can search for MAUI, and we got a couple of project types, right? We have the .NET MAUI app, we have the .NET MAUI Blazor app, which is the main event for this talk, and then we have the .NET MAUI class library for if you want to break up things into class libraries and you still want to have the power of writing platform code, then this is the template for you, basically. So if we take this .NET MAUI app and app 4, that is the one that's going to make me rich. I can feel it. .NET 6 sounds about right. It's going to think a little bit. It's going to come up with a little template, which is my project, and from there I can build my application, right? And what I want to mainly show you is kind of like go into the project structure here, just to see how it compares to the .NET MAUI Blazor one in a little bit. So basically everything that's outside of this platforms folder is shared, so including the resources that I just mentioned. So it will look a little bit different from the slides. I still need to update the slides, basically. But you can have your app icon here. It's broken up into that. And by putting something in here, you kind of like tell the build system, like, okay, whatever is in here, you can use this as your app icon. And right now, this is one of the areas where the tooling still need to catch up a little bit. So if we look into the CS_proj file, so your project file, you can see here these dedicated things. Let me zoom that in a little bit more, maybe. So here we have this MAUI icon, right? And this will be your app icon that's going to be on the main screen of your phone. You can do a total custom design if that's what you want. If you have a designer, that's great. If you just want to start out with your app, but you have a little logo created on Fiverr, I don't know, and you just have that and you have a background color, you can slap that in here, put the SVG in here, put a color in here, and we will center that image on the background color, and you will have a nice looking icon. And basically the same thing for a splash screen, right? You can just provide that SVG, we'll slap it in the middle right there, put a background color on it, and boom, you have a very simple splash screen just to start with. So we have our other images. This is basically for all the resizing stuff for all the different platforms, because you have all these different scale factors. For iOS, it's kind of like, there's not too much, but for Android, there's like a gazillion things depending on if you're running on your refrigerator or your watch or your phone, I don't know. You can do a whole bunch of things. Now, for the fonts, we have something different. And of course, your raw assets, so maybe you have like JSON files or video files or whatever you want to do. You can put them in kind of like the raw state right here. And we have folders for each of those, right? So it will try to automatically determine what the designated thing is for this, and it will do the right thing for you. We can also find the styles in here. So like John said, so you can break up like the colors and you can have those in the different styles. So we provide you with a default style because that's part of what we're trying to do with .NET MAUI as well. With Xamarin Forms and still with .NET MAUI, you're going to experience a lot of pain still from the cross-platform development stuff. I'll be honest. There's a lot to learn there, right? It still very much helps, as much as we try to abstract everything away, it still very much helps to know what's happening on Android and iOS mostly, or Windows. Windows is kind of like easier for most people, but there's still a lot to learn. So anything that we can take away from that initial kind of like learning curve, we try to do that. So we have this styles.xaml, so you can kind of like go in there, tinker a little bit with what's there, see what that impacts and how that works, instead of having to go out to the docs right away. Like, how do I do this? And kind of like the same thing that's happening for our MAUI program. This very much looks like if you've been working with ASP.NET Core or maybe some other .NET ecosystem projects, then you have this generic host builder, right? And you have this kind of like same pattern where we have the builder where you kind of like set up like the shell of your application. So you're going to say use MAUI app, which is, you know, you have to do that if you want to use MAUI. You can configure your fonts. Like John said again, we have like dependency injection built in, so you can do services.add transient, add singleton, do all these things, and use the constructor injection. That's all built in now, which, you know, if you're coming from like a more ASP.NET web developer background and you think like, oh, maybe I want to, you know, in the weekend try to build a cross-platform app, you already kind of like know how to use this instead of having to go through all kinds of tutorials and documentation, right? So that's kind of like what we're trying to do with all of this as well. So we have that, and yeah, we basically then covered a whole lot of what I wanted to tell you. And in these platforms, right, at the end of the day, we still have to provide like Google and Apple with like the binary that they understand that they can run on their platform, right? They're not going to say like, hey, here's an exe that runs on Windows, figure out how to make it work on your platform. They're not going to do that. And to do that, we still need metadata in the form that Apple and Google and Tizen and whatnot want to have it. So we still have also in these platforms, you can not only write platform-specific code, but we also have like the Android manifest, which has all the metadata, like what's your app name, what permissions do you want to request, all kinds of stuff that's in here. And of course, the same one for iOS. You can see the one already has the graphical editor and the other one is still in progress. So that's kind of like where the tooling is a little bit in preview right now. But you can still open this. It's all XML files, so you know you can figure out how to work with this. But this is all stuff that we need to provide in order to create an app that runs on iOS, Android, etc., etc. All right, so you know I'm not going to run this. It's just the little waving bot that we've seen already. So I'm going to save my time for other demos. Yes.
Question about the file structure.
Right. So can you show us the Solution Explorer again?
No, I was just going back in time. Yes.
Yeah, so in there for the Android, we can see that within the same folder, besides the resources, you have a lot of different files that they are not related, right? And as the app grows in complexity, then if you put it all on the same level, it's really difficult to navigate. Is it possible to move that around, or is there certain rules that you need to keep, like the Android manifest at the root level of Android folder?
No, I don't think so.
What are the restrictions?
I don't think so. Like John already showed you, like you have, like in the documentation, you can set up that CSproj thing with .android.cs. You can create your own complete own structure with that, if that's what you want. You can define your own folder. You can define your own pattern, what should be compiled whenever it's building for Android or iOS. And then for like the Android manifest, if you, again, this is all arranged with build action. So if you're just going to, is it? Maybe not this one. All right, maybe not this one. So I thought this was all arranged with like build action. So if you would set it to the right build action, it would just pick it up, but apparently that's not the case. So I would say just drop this into like the root of wherever your code for Android is going to live, and it should work. But I think you have other options. Like, I'm not sure if it works for like C as part, but if you have now the solution, filtered solutions or something. It's quite new, I think. So if you have multiple projects in here, you can unload, I don't know how it really, you have filtered solutions. Just use Bing to Google for filtered solutions and you can look into that. I will look it up after the session if you want. All right. So what is Blazor? Well, you already all know what Blazor is, and kind of like the fun thing to always say is like it's web development without JavaScript, right? Because if you think of like the single page applications, then you have these rich web applications with a cool sidebar and all these kinds of graphs and data grids and alerts and whatnot, and it just really looks cool. And whenever you go there on a mobile device, then it kind of like scales down, adapts to the form factor, is responsive, and now we don't have that left bar anymore, but that hides behind a hamburger menu, but it still looks really cool, right? But if you think about these applications, and you already always think about Angular and Vue and React and all those kinds of things, and those run on JavaScript. Now, I could go on and make jokes about JavaScript here, but in the time that I do, a million other JavaScript frameworks have come out, so let's not do that. But it isn't really about JavaScript. It's about whether you're switching between JavaScript or TypeScript or Rust or, I don't know, name a language, right? If you have to switch between languages, that's going to eat into your productivity. You just have to switch gears. Whatever I had to do it to do something with JavaScript, I would have to go out and search how to do this freaking thing over and over again just because you don't use it daily. So just that shift is going to eat into your productivity. So we've been thinking, how can we fix that? And we came up with Blazor, which basically allows you to do all those things with a single page application, but now keep using C#, all the tooling, Visual Studio Code, if that's what you want, Visual Studio Full, the IDE that you love to use. You will have this consistent ecosystem, so you don't have to use NPM to download half the internet. You can just keep using NuGet packages. And of course, this is building on a lot of stability over, I don't know, what did we just celebrate? 20, 25 years of Visual Studio and .NET and all that kind of stuff. So, there's a lot of history here already and a lot of experience that we can build off. So where does Blazor kind of fit in? Well, on the left, we have kind of like the web UI, MVC, Razor pages, single page applications. We already have them based on, I think, actual Angular and that kind of stuff. And of course, on the right, we have kind of like more the service approaches. So the HTTP APIs, REST APIs, workers, gRPC. Signal R is also a big thing in Blazor. And surprise, surprise, that little blank square, that's exactly where Blazor fits in, right? So this is really inside of the web UI. It's built on top of all the stuff basically that you see here. So Blazor we have in two variations. We have Blazor Server, which is kind of like more your traditional approach. Still everything runs on the server on top of ASP.NET Core. We have this little Blazor stack with Blazor components. I'm probably going to say Blazor components so many times that you'll get bored of it. But Blazor components, that's also a big thing if you ask me. And of course, we have the little .NET runtime in there because that's why we got rid of .NET Framework, right? We are shipping .NET with each application that we make so that we don't have dependencies that span the whole system, right? So this is our Blazor application, and then through a Signal R connection, we go to the browser and we interact with whatever it's on screen here. But this has to go back and forth to the server, right? It has to go to the server and say like, hey, the user clicked this. What is my state now? What do I have to show? And of course, it only kind of like transfers the differences between like the server and the client. But still, there's this overhead that each time you have to go back and forth to the server, right? So it definitely has its time and place. It definitely has its solutions. But if you want to look a little bit more closer to how JavaScript is doing, then you probably want to look at Blazor WebAssembly, which runs fully on the client. Now, WebAssembly is not something that we invented. It is a completely different technology, which kind of like, is an interpreter, runtime, whatever, for a certain language. So you can compile your language. I think there's a compiler for C++ and Rust. If you have your own language maybe lying around, you can write a compiler to compile it to WebAssembly, and you can also run in the browser. But we've made a compiler that compiles your .NET code into WebAssembly, and now we can suddenly run inside of the browser as well. And you can see the kind of like same stack. We just added WebAssembly. So now we run more like JavaScript. We can interact directly with the document object model in the browser. But of course, now we have kind of like a different problem, right? Because we have to download the .NET runtime each time, right? Because we have to provide that, because we don't want to have that installed on the system. So we're going to download that each time. Sure, there's some caching. For .NET 6, we trimmed down the .NET assembly to 1 megabyte. So, that's your average cat GIF, basically. But still, if you're rolling out to kind of like areas in the world where maybe mobile data or what kind of data you're using there is expensive or maybe not even really available at all, that's all stuff that you might want to take into account. So I'm not going to read all of this, it's a lot of text, but like with anything you have choices with, you have kind of like pros and cons. So basically what I just said, for Blazor Server, you have to have that persistent connection, right? So you also cannot do offline applications because you have to go to the server for each UI change. And you have a higher UI latency because of that, because each UI has to go to the server. And then on the other side, you have the larger download size, but you can actually, have the offline applications. You have to have that initial download, of course, but from then you can just run offline. So if you, have some kind of thing where you have to do an inventory in a cellar where there's no cellular data, then you can totally do that as long as you initially download the application first. So now we have Blazor Server, Blazor WebAssembly, and we're going to add this little third thing here, which is Blazor Hybrid. But before we do, let's go quickly into a little demo of just vanilla Blazor. So let me get this app out of the way right here. Close solution, don't save all of this. And whenever I do, you can use this with Visual Studio Stable, don't need any preview bits because this has been out for longer. And if we look for Blazor, then we will find a couple of different other things. We have server, we have WebAssembly, so we have those two different flavors right here. You can relatively easily switch between them if you choose the wrong one down the path, but it doesn't really matter which one we take here. Blazor App 2, .NET 6 sounds fine. Authentication, no thank you. Configure for HTTPS. Well, we're not animals, are we? So let's do HTTPS, and I don't know anything about Docker, so let's keep that off. And then we get a little web project, right? So this just runs on an ASP.NET capable server, basically. And we have all these kinds of things here, right? So we have new things. We have this www root, which has kind of like your static file, so your CSS, your little favorite icon, which is still a thing. We have a little bit of data for the weather forecast and the weather forecast service. And then we have our pages, right? So we have well, let me actually just run this. You probably know this because everyone knew what Blazor is. And basically you cannot have a file new template of an application without some kind of counter in there, apparently. So this one has that as well. And this consists of like 3 pages in this single page application, right? So let's just quickly go through what they do, and we'll see how that kind of like behaves in a .NET MAUI Blazor project. So what you could already see happening here is that there's, bless you, a lot of things are happening here, but one of the things is that there is this console window coming up, which is actually the server that is running our application, right? So keep that in mind. I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. And then we got the actual application here. So this is just a hello world, hello, welcome to your new app. This little gray box is interesting as well, keep in mind. And we have this little counter, click me, so here we have it. And this fetch data is the weather forecast that gets some static JSON data, right? So typically you would do a lot of JSON calls and AJAX calls. Who remember AJAX calls? Wow, that's a long time ago. All right, so and we have this pages, right? So we have this index right here. And this is a mix of kind of like, I don't know, a different kind of syntax things. So at the top we have this add page with which we specify the route. So if we go to the slash, it's nothing, right? So we go to the index. And you will see for other pages, if we go to the counter, it's /counter. So if you go to the counter endpoint, then we expect to come up on this page. But if we look at the rest, it's kind of like HTML, but not really, right? Because this page title is not an HTML thing, which is a little helper because you might want to set a title per page, right? Good for your SEO and that kind of stuff. So we have this little helper. You can see by the syntax highlighting that this is a Blazor or Razor specific thing. And with this, you can then hook into your kind of like layout that's wrapping this page and set the actual page title. Now, we do have actual HTML H1 with just a plain string. And then we have this survey prompt, right? And this is a reusable Blazor component thing that I mentioned earlier. And if you look at how that works, we have this little shared folder right here, and here we have this same survey prompt. And the name is just inferred from like the file name here, survey prompt. That's also going to be the name of like the label that you need to put in here. And if we look inside of that, you can have this HTML and also some code, right? So we have this add code, and then we can create a code block, which is just C# code. And you can mix all of this kind of like PHP. I started my career, well, just tinkering with stuff with PHP. You can all mix that together, which is really cool. And basically, whenever you find this apenstaartje, this @ sign, you know it's kind of like something that's referring to C#, right? So we have this @ title, which referred to a C# property right here. And then whenever we add this parameter thing to it here, we can suddenly set this from the outside. So now we're creating reusable Blazor components. So whenever you do this, you can see here the title, we can set that here. It lands here in this property, and now we can reuse it here in this little reusable code, and we can show it here in our homepage with this little title, right? So that's how you can create these components. Now in this case, it's not really useful because it's in the same project, but you can take this little component, put it in its own DLL, and now you have a reusable component that you can use across projects. If you take that project, put it in a NuGet, now the whole world can use survey prompts, which is not really useful because it's in the file new template, but you get the idea. So that's it for reusable components. And the really cool thing is here for this, sorry for the counter thing, like this works, right? We just go to this page title again, we have this H1, we have this current count, and here we have the @ sign again, which refers to a variable in C#. And here we can also mix things. We have this button, and we can say add on click. And typically you would do JavaScript : and then refer to your JavaScript method, right? We don't need to do that anymore. You can just say add on click, we can say increment count, and we can refer to this C# method, and we can just say current count ++, and you could see it automatically picks up that something has changed in this variable, and it will update the UI. So you can just stick with C# and write all your stuff that way. Now, in your program here, you will notice a very similar thing. In C#10 and .NET 6, and I don't really know where this lives, we have all this new kind of minimal API stuff where we remove the indentation basically. So it looks a little bit different than it did from like the .NET MAUI project, but you can still see that builder and add services, add Razor pages, and also add singleton. So we have the dependency injection here as well. So we have this weather forecast service, which is used for like the fetch data thing. So we just register that here in our generic host builder, do some other things to make our Blazor application ready. And then if you look at like the fetch data page, you can see that we have this add inject kind of like syntax to inject something here inside of our page. So this is basically your constructor injection. And now you can use this forecast service here to actually, get the forecasts, right, for today, for now. And then it will populate it with all this data. So that's really cool. Just keep this in mind while I go through the other demo, and we will see a lot of similarities. So that's basically the anatomy of a Blazor application. Am I going way over time? I think so, but you all live close, right? I need to go farthest anyway, so. Where's my slides? Here we go. Okay, so that's that. Then we have the last question, kind of like the main event, right? What is then .NET MAUI plus Blazor? It's basically the best of both worlds. And I have this very cool PowerPoint animation, which took a long time to create because PowerPoint and animations are enemies. All right, so what can you do with this actually? You can build cross-platform native applications that run on Windows, macOS, iOS, and Android, right? That's the same platforms that we've seen for .NET MAUI because it's just a .NET MAUI app, basically. You can use your existing Razor class library. So those are those reusable Razor components, right? You don't need to do anything special for it. You can just take pre-built class libraries. You have component vendors who are creating pre-built components for you to use. You can just take the Razor components that they've created, put it into your .NET MAUI Blazor application, and it will just work. So that's really cool. And what's really important is that you can have full platform device access. I will get to that in a little bit. So Blazor Hybrid, that's what we're talking about here, is basically the extension of Blazor. It's kind of like the third option with the other options of like, Blazor Server, Blazor WebAssembly. It's built on top of .NET 6 and .NET MAUI, which is kind of weird in a way because it's also available on WPF and WinForms. So you can use the Blazor Web View, that's the way it's implemented. You can use those also in WinForms and WPF, which allows you to do a whole bunch of other crazy stuff. So this Blazor Web View, it's just another element, which also allows you to have a lot of options. So in your main page at XAML, we're back in .NET MAUI right now, you can have this Blazor Web View, and you have to configure a couple of things. I actually skipped something in my Blazor demo I just thought of right now, but that doesn't really matter. So we have this index.html, which is kind of like the host page of our application. And then you're going to specify like, okay, the Blazor application that I want to load inside of that has to live in this selector. So this is an HTML selector, an app. So this is like, your div ID is app. That's that thing. And then you're going to say the component type that you have to load in there is this is a little bit of syntax, is my main thing, right? And that refers to like the main.razor. And this is kind of like a special thing. It's not really the Razor page, but this is a router, which I didn't really show in the demo just now. But this router kind of like bootstraps your Blazor application. It scans the app assembly that's defined right here. So the assembly, the DLL that you pointed to, and then it's going to scan all those add pages for all the endpoints that are there, and it's going to load the whole application and map it out for you. Then whenever an endpoint is found, it's going to go into this found one, and whenever it doesn't find the endpoint that you're going to, it's going to this not found, which is basically your 404 scenario, right? And then from there, you can use all the pages and the layouts and whatnot. So before we go look into how that exactly works, let's do a little Mythbuster. So Blazor Hybrid runs 100% natively in one process. So we're not kind of like mimicking a server client process thing on your on your mobile device, right? We're not doing that little console application in the background. We're not spinning up a server. Blazor is a .NET application already. We don't need to go through WebAssembly. We don't need to go through like a server that's somewhere in the cloud or on your device or whatnot. We can just execute it on the .NET runtime directly, and the .NET runtime we have already because we can run .NET MAUI. So we can just run it as a .NET application. Therefore, we also don't have that initial hit of like the download or the UI latency, right? Of course, you still have to download the app from the App Store. Sure, that's there. But that means there's also no HTTP request, unless, of course, you're getting data from a server, right? Sure, then you're going to have HTTP requests. But if you want, you can build a completely offline app with Blazor. It never has to reach the internet if that's what you want. So kind of like the only thing that's still HTML is the UI basically rendered in this web view control. It's not interpreted. It's not like JavaScript thingies. And whenever you go outside of what we have built for you, you have to suddenly still do Objective-C or Java or whatnot. You don't have to do that. The only thing is HTML, and for the rest, you can actually, do all the things that you want to do. So let's see a little demo of that. I'm going to start first with a plain .NET MAUI Blazor application. If I can point my cursor under pressure here. All right. So let's again look for Blazor, and we find this .NET MAUI Blazor application. And if we go in there, we still have to specify a project name, still .NET 6, all sounds good. And whenever we get here, then you will see that we basically see the .NET MAUI template, we see the Blazor template, and we basically smash those together, and boom, now we have a .NET MAUI Blazor application. Because we see the same data thing with like the weather forecast, we have these pages right here with the counter.razor, index.razor, blah, blah. But we also have the platforms folder, right, for Android and iOS and whatnot, because we're still creating a native app right here. And we have like the shared, so our layout, our survey prompt, a www for the static files, including the index.html, right? So here is like the wrapper that I just didn't show you with all the other HTML that we have here. And this is the app ID that we're going to load our actual application in, right? So this is the layout that wraps around all the things for a regular Blazor application that's good for your SEO, your search engine optimization, that kind of stuff. You don't really care about that for a mobile application, of course, but this is where we're going to load the application. So in our main page, we then only see this Blazor web view. So you can go two ways about this, right? You can create now your hybrid application being a giant web view, basically, which is going to be the main of your application and build all of your stuff inside of that. Or, which is specifically interesting if you are building on top of WinForms or WPF. If you have that legacy application and you want to modernize it without completely rewriting it, because that's always, that's always something that you don't, well, you want to do it, but you don't really get the time and the resources to actually do it, right? You can modernize it piece by piece, basically, because you can now load this Blazor web view inside of a single piece of your application, modernize that, maybe share the code with a Blazor application that you're developing side by side, and now you can already benefit from that inside of your legacy application as well. You can also see that here. So let me just run this on Windows. You'll have to trust me. The Android emulator is not always the fastest, so that whenever you run this on Android, it will kind of like look the exact same. But if we run this on Windows, it's kind of like very interesting that we're going to see the exact the exact Blazor template, but now running inside of a .NET MAUI application. In this case, running on Windows. But the kind of like the really cool thing here is that we're not bound to this browser sandbox. So when you're running Blazor as a web application inside of your browser, then luckily we have a browser sandbox, right? You don't want to click a wrong button and boom, your drive is formatted. Hopefully we can't do that. That's what the sandbox is for, and of course for a lot of other things. But now, with this Blazor application inside of a .NET MAUI application, you can format your hard drive because we're not bound to that sandbox, right? So you have all the power of a Blazor application, but you're not bound to the sandbox, which would be, a real handicap, I think, for this ecosystem if we were to do that, because then you would still have. Now the hybrid applications is kind of like a broad term, but it would not really feel like an application that belongs on the platform, right? So this can do still all the things. You can reuse all of your code from like the Blazor stuff, but you can also turn it around. You can also use this as a element inside of your application. So what we could also do is not make this a content page, but make this a tabbed page. Tabbed, I can't type under pressure, tabbed page. And now we're using the tabs as they're supposed to look on Windows, right? Or Android or iOS, depending on what you're running on. And we can specify different children. So we just do a content page, and I can give this a title, and I can say index, whoops. And I can move this whole thing inside of that, right? So boop, put it in here, and I can copy this. And then I can say, okay, I have another tab, and now I say counter. The only thing I need to do, because now it's going to load the whole application in all of these tabs, I want to not reference like that main router thing of the Razor and then load the full application. But what I want to do is now load a single page, right? Or maybe another Blazor element, a reusable component if that's what you want. So to do that, I want to reach out to my pages, and this is a little shorthand, XML namespace. I'm going to say pages. You can prevent typing all the things that you can see here basically by wrapping it in this one word. That's what this does. So I can say CLR namespace, and now I can look for pages. It's probably a bit small, sorry about that. And now I can refer to the pages, right? So instead of doing local main, I can say pages, and here I can say index, and here I can say counter. And I can do the last one as well, but let's just keep it at this one. So if I run this again, now we will get without a lot of styling. So, forgive me for not doing that. And it's even not building because I forgot to update the other part of this. Main page. Actually, it's stupid. I can just remove this. I don't know why this is in here. Then we don't have this problem. So now we're going to see this tabbed page, which shows the tabs the way they're intended on Windows in this case. And I didn't really style them, so it probably will not look like much. But if I were to run this on Android, it would look a little bit different. And now it's just going to load these pages inside of these tabs right here, right? So you can see the same thing, but now it's just elements inside of this native application. So you can really choose your route if you want to go full Blazor with everything, or you just have this. On the one tab, you have this real native application with .NET MAUI, and then on the other page, you're using a Blazor application. You can do all these kinds of crazy things. So that's really cool. Also here, like, you know, we have the MAUI program again. You can see we add some initialization for the MAUI Blazor web view stuff, but we can also still register our weather forecast service. And now we can really mix this stuff again. Well, it's not really mixing, it's the same as that we would do in Blazor. We can just register it here as usual, but now inside of our page, you can see what you can still inject this thing the same way, right? So this all works, mix and matches, and you can do it whether you're, you know, used to working in Blazor or .NET MAUI. This all just works the same. Now I have a whole bunch of demos and not really much time, so let's just go into the quick demo that John has built. I kind of like build the same thing because he sent me the code, and I was like, ha, I can do that better. So here we not have John.net, but we have Gert.net. And this application is like, you know, it's doing the same thing, but now with Blazor. So we see all this Blazor stuff right here, but I don't need, like, you know, I don't know if you really showed that. He has like all this code here in the platforms for iOS. No, is it not here? Where is it? Where is it? Oh, the behaviors. Oh, thank you. Behaviors. And we have this blur behavior for Android. Look at how much code this is. Oh my gosh. Oh, all the code. And iOS. Oh no. Oh, I can't look at this anymore. So what I did is like, you know, I have CSS, I have some knowledge. What I did is just go into my pages, my index, and I created the same thing with, you know, this fancy layout. And what I did is the same photo URL, but what I could do here, this is it. This is what I needed to do to make it work on all platforms. Woohoo! Yeah, people normally applaud here, but that's okay. So you can just say, you can use all of the CSS stuff, right? So I can just use filter, blur, and then I can read this little blur value from a little variable that I have here. Oh, I should have named this better. From this little variable here, blur, right? And whenever I do something with my foo thing here, no, that's not it. Oh, sorry, I tied it up to a slider right here. I'm sliding that thing up and down, and the blur will automatically update. So if I have the same thing, right? So I can just take this, and you can see that the same blur applies to this as well. Now, I don't think the take photo is going to work. I was going to implement that, but then I got busy. So I don't think this will do anything because it's not supported on this platform, right? It's good that we're checking that. Maybe what I could do if I feel adventurous, let's do a little bit of light. You don't have anything better to do, right? So it's not like it's Friday evening. Pick. We also have pick photo async. So maybe I can pick one from my file system and make that work. Ooh, I can still mimic John's demo right here. This is a service book. Yes, let's do it. Let's do it. Yep. Hold in your tummies. Look nice. Oh, no, go away. This is the wrong one. Oh, good thing it's you. Yeah, good. All right, cool. Our application is coming up. Did it actually take the picture? Oh, I think it's here. Okay, cool. Where does it save this? I don't know. I have no clue how to. Oh, open folder. That's good. Camera roll. Okay, that sounds good. I have no clue if this is going to work. This was not prepared. And usually then it doesn't work. So copy as path. Okay, take photo. See, now take photo. He did it with the camera. You also have like the capture one, camera roll. Oh my gosh. Boom, it crashes. All right, this doesn't work. I don't know why, but that's interesting. So, you know, you should be able to do the exact same thing, basically. And you can see that I actually use the exact same APIs for Essentials, and it comes up with, like, the file picker, right? The media picker. So you can reuse all of that same stuff from Essential, all the APIs that are available to you on Windows, whatnot. You can just use that from your Blazor application. Now there was one other demo. I will go over it really quickly, which shows like the very interesting different ways that you can do with this. So are there any like AFOLs, adult fans of Lego? No? All right, good, me neither. But there is, I have 2 young kids and they are getting into Lego a little bit. So, you know, I enjoy building it, but I don't really have like some passion like some people do to get all these expensive sets and do those. But looking into it, there are websites that track all the sets that are out there. You can even like order individual blocks, bricks. They kind of like track their colors, what they taste like, I don't know, where to get them, all kinds of things. So you have websites to do that. So I start entering, as the nerd that I am, like the sets that we have. We are doing a little construction on the house. So I wanted to know how many boxes I need to move all that Lego from one place to the other, right? So I got all the sets, entered that in the website, brick tracker. I think it's a brick, is it actually brick tracker? I don't know. And you can download the CSV file from that and actually see, you know, all the data about that. So I built that in a little application, and for the web, like this is a Blazor site. I built it in a couple of different variations. For this Blazor website running in the browser, I really have to have this file picker, right? I can only let the browser execute stuff that I actually explicitly had it because of the sandbox. So I have to choose the files. Then I have these CSVs. I have this Harry Potter thing right here, and you can see all the sets right here, right? And I can do a little analyze, and it's doing some heavily AI complex algorithm to compute all this. And then we have 10,000 pieces, and I need 2 boxes to move it, right? So we have all this, but I can only do it with that CSV that I handed because of the browser sandbox. So okay, all cool. This is this project right here. I basically only use the index page, and you can see we have this input file, which is a helper for Blazor again. And you can see here the onChange. I can refer to another C# method right here. And if we scroll all the way down, you can see that load files right here. It's going to, you know, get that CSV, do all the things with there, and it's going to show it here in this layout. And actually, you can see here a reusable Razor component, because this collection summary is something that I put into a separate project, which is right here, and you can see we have this collection summary, right? And the real cool thing is we have another parameter that we can set things to, and it cannot just be a boring string, right? We can also put complex objects in here. So this is a, I don't know, what is this actually? It's a brick set collection object, which is a C# object, and I can just assign that to this sets thing right here. And then it automatically knows here in the collection summary, if I scroll down to the code block, oh, my super secret algorithm here, task.delay, oh no. We can see that we have this little property here again, right? So you can just assign a complex object to that property, and then we can use that here as well. So that really makes the reusable components even more powerful. Now, I reuse this component across like the other platforms, but what I can do now, if I build this also as a .NET MAUI application, so this MAUI client, and that you can see right here. So it'll be no surprise that I have this index.razor again, because I now have to do things a little bit different, because we're now suddenly on a mobile app. But we have this same collection summary. And here I can suddenly use like the Microsoft MAUI storage, right? So this is what previously was Essentials. And now I can use kind of like the file picker, right? So I can show the file picker whenever I'm on Android and iOS, and it's going to show me the file picker as it's intended on that platform. Let me see if this starts within reasonable time. And then we can actually do the same thing, right? So we're going to pick file. So the picked file, we're going to get that. We're going to open the file stream. We're going to read the contents of that. And then we're going to show that exact same thing, but now on a mobile device. Okay, so here we see the exact same thing. And now this looks kind of like the exact same, of course, as it was within the browser. But now this is, you know, it's really powerful because you're now reaching into this platform-specific code instead of just a file upload box. And if I select a CSV, then we have like the same functionality here. But you know, this is the way that you work with file systems on Android and iOS, right? You still need to have that file picker. But if I now switch it over to Windows without changing any code, the exact same .NET MAUI application, on desktop, it would be way more normal to actually read maybe something directly from the file system, right? Because you have access to the file system directly, whereas on mobile devices, you might not have that same access to it. But on desktop, it would then feel weird. So we have a little bit of a different path here. We're using a file watcher, and a file watcher is something that has existed in .NET for a long time. You can just point it to a folder and hook up events for when a file is changed, created, deleted, whatnot, and you can take action on that. So whenever I drop in a CSV file in a specific folder, it will now pick up that CSV file, and this will feel much more natural for a desktop application, right? So it should be running here. And you can see there's no button now, right? I've made sure of that. And whenever I go here to my solution. Open this in the File Explorer. I should see the CSV files right here. So let's just take the two of them. Let's be adventurous. Go into my downloads folder. I hope there's nothing embarrassing. Phew. And I put them in here, and boom, it loads them automatically, right? So it has these two files. And I can analyze all these things here again. And whenever I delete them again, then they will be gone again because I'm using that file system watcher, right? So that's how you can go about it on the desktop, because you just get outside of that browser sandbox and you can leverage all this stuff. Now, the last thing, thank you, yes, someone who understands. The last thing that I quickly want to show you is this little WinForms. So WinForms is always there. You can always count on it. See, boom, it's blazingly fast. You have this boring gray data grid kind of thing, but you can run it. And this isn't really hooked up to anything that I've just shown you, but it's just to get the point across. And I used Bing to Google for free Blazor components, and I came up with like Radson Blazor, I think, which makes some pretty decent stuff. And this is all WinForms. But then if you go into this analysis tab, then suddenly you can load this Blazor web view and you can load these Blazor components. And probably Radson doesn't even know that .NET MAUI Blazor is the thing. They didn't optimize anything for this. You can just pull down those components, put them in here, and suddenly you have something modern and cool that you can use inside of your WinForms legacy application. So that's another route that you can take here as well. All right. Let me just wrap this up really quick. There's another really cool demo, which is on a website called .NET Podcasts. So, of course, completely written out, dotnet.Podcasts.com, which is a very cool showcase application. It's still maintained. And you can go there, and what's really cool about this is that the website is a Blazor application, and then we basically build the mobile application in two ways. It does the exact same, but one is built in Blazor, .NET MAUI Blazor, and it shares components with the actual website. And the other one is like pure .NET MAUI, so that's the actual native application. So you can really see between those two, like what are the architectural differences and how to do what and whatnot. And also you can host the whole thing yourself. All the backend stuff is there as well. Don't forget to turn it off on your Azure account. I forgot to turn it off, and I went through my credits really fast. So please don't forget that. But you can run it yourself, or you can just use this hosted instance. And what's really cool is that there is, not everything is implemented, but a lot is. And you can kind of like listen together, which is kind of like the killer feature in this, which uses a signal R connection. So for the people who don't know what that is, you can have real-time connections that stay open to communicate or do whatever. And you can listen together. So you can start listening a podcast, and you can create a room. Others can join, and you will have a synchronized listening session. And you can have these smileys and emojis flying across the screen, depending on what you're hearing, and communicate with your friends in real time. So that's really cool. This is really a showcase for a kind of like real life-ish scenario with a lot of things to it. So I can see that you're out of your food coma, and you're like, yes, I want to go home and try all of this right now. But hang on. I got something, a little bit of closing advice right here. Questions that I get a lot now is like, even before the session, like, when do I use, you can see where the kind of like sessions the slides that were created for me and the slides that I have to create myself, where it kind of like stops. When should I use .NET MAUI Blazor, or should I use .NET MAUI Blazor at all? Or, when should I use .NET MAUI? Or when should I use .NET MAUI? Or when should I use just Blazor, right? So the basically software engineer answer to all of this is kind of like, it depends, right? So we have all kinds of paths here. Maybe you're a web developer that's looking to go into cross-platform development. Now you have like all the skills that you can reuse without having to learn a ton of stuff. You can leverage all of your HTML, CSS knowledge and build crazy cool stuff. You just have to learn a little bit of C# and a lot of cross-platform stuff. But at least you can reapply your web developer stuff. You have maybe an existing Blazor application, and you still want to have that icon in the App Store and download your application like that, or really make use of those device sensors, the geolocation, the cameras, all that kind of stuff. You can totally do that without having to rewrite all the code. Basically, you can still reuse some of that. And that's also like, maybe I skipped over that. Like, that's why I One of the questions that might come up is like, why can't we just have a target on a .NET MAUI Blazor application that also goes to the web? Simply because we didn't implement it. And personally, I don't see, this is really my personal opinion, I have to emphasize, I don't see that happening very quickly because I just don't believe in it. I already think like, mobile apps and desktop apps is kind of like putting them together. You can do it, but it still will take a lot of time to really tinker with it and tweak it, that it also feels good on kind of like both platforms. And web, I really feel that's like, another world entirely. So there are frameworks out there that definitely do it. I think Uno is one. You can also target the web with that. And I'm sure that you could do amazing stuff. But I personally feel that you're still spending so much time that it feels natural on the web and desktop and mobile that you could, just have rewritten the web thing entirely and make it nice from scratch. So where I see the real value of this is creating those reusable Blazor Razor components and applying those across your platforms. And you have this little bit of overhead that, you have to create your Razor pages on both things, but there you can really optimize it then on depending on the platform that you're running it on. Or of course, the legacy application that I just showed you and I already mentioned earlier, because face it, we go to these sessions and then we see all the latest and greatest, and then tomorrow, well, Monday, hopefully, you go back to your desk and you have to work on that legacy application again. So hopefully this will give you some perspective to modernize that as well. So if you talk about like when do I choose what, Blazor definitely for reach. If you have a web browser, you can run Blazor basically on your refrigerator, on your robot vacuum thing. I don't know. You can use Blazor everywhere. You can wrap it into a progressive web app if that's what you want. So if you reach is like your most important thing, definitely go for that side. If you're kind of like in between the middle, for some reason you want to reuse your skills, you want to reuse code, go with the hybrid approach, which is kind of like in the same ballpark as Electron, but better, I would say, not just because it's our product and Electron is not, but the whole Blazor thing runs natively on the platform, so much less overhead and memory eating and that kind of stuff. It just runs faster. Or have a native view and a web view. Please don't do that. Just forget that. And if you really want to have the power of the whole platform that you're running on, then you can choose like the couple of frameworks that we have: MAUI, WinUI, if you know that you're only going to ever run on Windows, WinForms, WPF, and you can do all that stuff. Thank you so much for joining. That's all that I have for today, and I think I already went way over time, so sorry about that. If you have any questions, let me know.
Yes.
I'm trying to figure out the limits of .NET MAUI Blazor.
There are no limits. Yes.
Yeah. Let's see. Now, let's say I'm building a web application, crowd operations intensive. Mm-hmm. So lots of data grids. Mm-hmm. So on a data grid, you can use context menu, for example, right? Mm-hmm. Or multiple cell selection, multiple row selection, and you can do this on web desktop easily. But how about mobile or tablet?
Sure, but that's not so much a limitation for, I think, whatever framework you're using, but more like mobile device versus desktop device then, right? Yeah, it depends on how you want to implement it, I guess. If you look at how you would do that for, and then I'm thinking maybe of like your photo selection or something like that. And I'm on iOS mostly, and then you usually have this select button that you have to press first, and then kind of like checkboxes come up, and you go check them all. So you can definitely come up with ways. And for the context menu, what you typically see happening is that you do a long press for any type of context menu, right-click menus that you come up with. That's all nuances that you can make, or maybe it's even built in, right? That it, depending on the platform that you're running on, without changing any code. We have that for like Xamarin Forms and .NET MAUI. If you use a list view, you have those context menus. And if you run it on Windows, you right-click and the menu comes up. If you run it on Android, you have to do a long press. The context menu comes up. So there's some different ways, and of course you're free to implement it if you have a great idea, like I have these million grids and I have to select a gazillion rows and cells, and you have some crazy idea on how to make a good user experience for that. Or if you look at like the Blazor, I think you asked specifically about Blazor. Okay, so maybe Yeah, that might be a good one. Okay, maybe it's clicking right now what you're asking. So if you have like a Blazor component that is existing from some kind of vendor that you want to download, and that has the capabilities to do all kinds of context menus, right clicks and whatnot, how would that work for a .NET MAUI Blazor application? I don't know. Yeah, it depends on how it's set up. But if you're going like into that like really specific area, then they might need to implement some optimizations to use it also on mobile. On the other hand, if it's already designed for like, you know, a usage inside of a responsive web application, which is probably the case, right? They should have some kind of thing implemented to make it easier on mobile, and that's going to work in .NET MAUI as well. So it kind of depends on their implementation, but whatever they implement for mobile, how it's supposed to work, that will also work in .NET MAUI. I hope that somewhat answers your question.
Any more questions?
I have one small question. It's about more about just about front-end debugging. Like, do we have any kind of inspector for the MAUI?
Yes. So for .NET MAUI, .NET MAUI Blazor?
Both.
For both, it's still yes. Again, for .NET MAUI, the tooling is still catching up. If I run this again, we should have a XAML live preview, I think. If you've worked with Xamarin and that things before? Okay, so we did a couple of attempts of designers and whatnot and previews, and they didn't really all work out that great. So we're doing another attempt, and this is the XAML live preview. So you know, you will see whatever is on your screen for the emulator, simulator, your physical device. Doesn't really matter. And this is right now, you know, pretty simple. You know, it looks simple. The technology is pretty complex, but you can kind of like see what's in here, right? So you don't have to switch between the windows all the time. You can also do rulers, so you can get that pixel perfect stuff. But you can also already do like click this little thing right here, and then you can go over like the different. For some reason, it's just picking up the Blazor web view, so it might need support for Blazor. But you can go over the different elements, and it will actually take you to like the XAML element there, and you can do the other way around, I think. And you can also kind of like, you have the live visual tree here, so you can see kind of like, again, this is going to be not working for the Blazor web view probably yet. But else you would see the complete tree of all the visual stuff that's in here and see the properties and maybe change something, and it will reload. Now for the Blazor stuff, it's kind of interesting. We had all this stuff here in the MAUI program, right, which I skipped over pretty soon. Here we have if debug, and we have this app Blazor web view developer tools, right? Because this is still just a web view, so we can't really inspect it. You can already see it from Visual Studio. So if I can get rid of this blue thing, thank you. But now what I can do is go into Edge, and I can go, I think, into, what is it, Edge inspect or something like that. And we should see the Blazor web view popping up here because it's enabled, right? You can disable it with that little line that you saw. It should pop up. No, it's a different one. Oh no, wait, what's this? Localhost, remote target? I don't know, I can't click it. You should be able to, I don't know how to do it right now, but you should be able to make the thing show up here. And then you would get the inspector window as you would get on any other website, and you can go through the whole thing and do all the things there. So yeah, that's definitely what's there today, and that will, as the tooling will get more mature, that will only expand from there, basically.
Thank you.
No problem.
No more questions? Here goes the backup.